what I'm doing here is a little pet peeve of mine. I have noticed a lot of friends, clients, people around me over the past, 5, 6 years, as they go into a deeper phase of their spiritual journey, they go online and they find all kinds of weird information. And a lot of them come back saying, oh my God, it's happening, there's this shift happening, we're all going to 4D. And then I wait for them to explain what that means, or I ask them questions, and I've never been able to figure it out. And so I go down internet rabbit holes trying to figure out what it means, and I can't find coherence anywhere. And so my point is, they're all onto something. There absolutely is a shift happening. There's actually a lot of shifts happening. And when you go deep on it, you realize it's more nuanced and actually, I think, more hopeful. So, who has even heard the term 4D? You can raise your hand. I'll admit, I might be picking on Tom mostly here, because I look through the chat and he's like the only one who uses the term.
I would expect nothing less.
People say we're living in 3D, the 3 dimensions, and then there's 4D. It's not time apparently, it's some other inner dimension. And so I think can everybody agree that they're aware of a shift happening in themselves and something that seems to be happening in culture globally around the world? And so I want you to just take a few seconds and think about how you would describe that shift. What would you say is shifting, and what does it look like on the other side of the shift? Are there feelings? Are there thoughts? Is it about the way you view the world? Is there anybody who would be willing to just throw out a word or two?
Decentralized collaboration.
Of that.
Free.
Free.
Loss of trust, looking inward.
Loss of trust, looking
Inward.
Looking inward, yeah. Because
Less order.
less order.
Connected.
Everything is possible.
Hope, everything is possible.
Searching for more.
Searching for more, yeah. Beautiful. So in my research, if you were, one way to define this is simply as an ill-defined meme. So that's kind of what I've been saying. I think you're all onto something, but I'm saying if you look online, there's just all kinds of it looks like the rapture. It looks like everybody's been suffering for thousands of years. There's going to be someone's going to snap their fingers. We're all going to become enlightened. It's going to be beautiful. We're all going to get along. And the truth is, there is a lot of science on this topic. So here's a handful of developmental models. I just looked this up today. Piaget is a very famous one. He looks at cognitive development. He has a theory on stages of cognitive development. He started developing it in the 1920s. So he realized that there was this evolution happening, that people aren't just born and stay at one level. Young children go through stages, a lot of this gets into adult development. So we have ego, we have this thing called stages from Terry O'Fallon, which is amazing. Robert Keegan is kind of famous in the business world. Harvard Business loves him. Moral development, your moral, what you consider to be good. Spiritual development in terms of faith is James Fowler. Mystical development, spiral dynamics is one I will try not to talk too much about. We have an expert here. Peter Mary is way deeper in this. He's worked with Don Beck a lot. I think he's going to present on that in London. And then integral theory, which kind of takes them all and gives you a base upon which to apply them. So you can see over here is spiral dynamics. There's colors. They did that first. Ken Wilber wanted to challenge them. He changed the colors just enough to be confusing. And if you were to lay this out, you would kind of see the integral colors over here. And then along here, these are the other lines of development. So this is 6 of them. And this is what some people call an integral psychograph. So the point is, you have all of these lines of development happening within you. And you could be up here in one, down here in another, up here. And then you don't really exist at any level. You kind of have a center of gravity. Sometimes you're way up here, sometimes you get triggered, your shadow material comes up, you go way down lower. But all of this is generalizations. None of this is who you are. But if you're on a journey and you want to figure out what your next steps are, or maybe where you're lacking, it can be really helpful to orient yourself. All right, so this is the stages of development according to Ken Wilber. And what the key insight behind all of these is that it's based on the number of perspectives you're capable of taking, which gets confusing, but I'll try to break it down for you. So first of all, most people would look at the top and go, well, that's it. That's the 4D shift, right? You realize oneness, you exhibit wisdom, joy, love, seen in saints and sages throughout history. This is the highest level. This is not happening in more than a dozen people globally, maybe 1,000. Nobody knows. It's very, very, very hard to track, but it's very rare. Like Sri Ravi Shankar from The Art of Living, I've been in his presence, I would guess. But he's over my head, so I can't actually be a judge. Anything that's above you, you can't see well. So we all start here. All of these things apply to individuals and to cultures. So if you can't see the bottom, infrared, archaic, that's a fused perspective. That's when you're born, you literally don't know you exist separate from your mother. When you're in the womb, you don't know you have a separate identity. I wrote down newborns and Neanderthals. So your focus is survival, instinct, and there's a sense of almost isolation. We then get to what they call red, which is a first-person perspective. So reality comes from within. This is narcissism in its healthiest form, assuming you grow out of it. We can talk about Trump later, but our culture is calling forth this energy because it's lacking in the people who were in power. There's a healthy form of this, and we all need it. So narcissism, tribalism, it's impulsive. It says egocentric, vigilant and aggressive, impulsive and ruthless. It's also courageous, determined, and powerful. So then we have a second-person perspective. So this is when you realize, I have a perspective. Oh, wait a minute, you have a perspective too. And I can start to take your perspective. So I'm taking your perspective. This is traditional culture. This is, I said, children and clerics. So obedience, loyalty, conformity. Reality comes from a higher power. Most of the fundamentalist religious people you see in the world, this is their center of gravity. And of course, now we're getting curious, like, when do the AI religions come? You'll see how this breaks out across the population, the percentages of people. These are people at this stage of development are likely to orient towards AI as an overlord. When I realize I have a perspective, you have a perspective, and we can both look at something. That's a third-person perspective, right? I think everybody gets this is where science comes from. There is something objective outside of us, which is not us. And if we triangulate, we can find truth. So teens, healthy teens in our culture, and technocrats. So rationality, achievement, autonomy, values science, individualism, democracy, capitalism, materialism, risk-taking, and self-reliance. This was the beginning of recognizing like there's an objective truth that we all share, and it kind of starts to equalize humanity. This was I'll talk about how that arose in our country specifically, but this is a huge, huge shift. Then we have green, which is postmodern. So fourth person perspective. You're looking at the objective, but you're also realizing I have a perspective on the objective which is unique. We each have a unique perspective. This is starting to be the collapse of truth. This is what you're seeing on college campuses. This is, where everyone feels like they need a safe space and their feelings are more important than anything else. And, gender has become very confusing from this perspective. And the key thing to remember is that each one of these has part of the truth, but it's also partially blind. Every single one of these levels tends to think that its perspective is the entire truth. And the next stage is a momentous leap because it overcomes that. So reality is not a perception, but a conception. So by looking, we make reality. And this starts to blend into quantum physics in ways that it shouldn't. It's not exactly what quantum physics is saying. Your thoughts don't literally create the particle collapse. It doesn't matter what you're thinking when you do the experiment, actually. It's actually a device that's measuring. But it is very weird, and there is something about having consciousness and having a perspective that takes part in that. It's just not the whole story. And so empathy, equality, relativism, values pluralism, relativistic and sensitive. Civil rights take it on a whole new level. Environmentalism really blossomed here. It's world-centric. It's really a heart opening. This is one of the most beautifully intentional levels. When people reach this level, They start to see the beauty in everyone and they want their perspective to be honored. The problem is it can go wrong and the red level can be in shadow, and then it becomes very narcissistic, where you want to dominate other people with your perspective and you insist that they see your perspective as true. And you want to make policies based on your personal emotions. This one in particular has been the leading edge. It has been taking over institutions, taking over governments. There's been a whole lot of great policies put in place. If you've ever been in a meeting where you go around the room and you make everybody's voices heard and everybody's feelings are heard, and then you realize you didn't get to the agenda, so you set a second meeting, and then you get to the second meeting and the same thing happens, and then 6 months later you decide you actually aren't going to do the startup because you're not quite sure what to do. That's where people are stuck. And what they're missing, when you grow out of a level, the level below it tends to go into shadow as well. So orange is the one who's like, why are we here? Let's get it done. I don't care about your fucking emotions. This is like finance. This is like, let's go, let's go, let's go. So they tend to see the limitations in that and then overcorrect and just throw it away entirely. So what Ken Wilber has pointed out is this is what he calls first tier, and he calls it a momentous leap into second tier. This one he calls teal. In spiral dynamics, it's yellow. So this is a fifth person perspective. You're taking a perspective on the first four perspectives. So you're looking at, I have a perspective, you have a perspective, we can find reality. We each have a unique view on the reality, but actually those unique views on reality are going through an evolutionary process. So the fifth person perspective is the first one that says, I have this within me, this within me, this within me, this within me. I can't look down on any of them. It's like looking down on myself as a child. Like, I want all that energy within me. And actually, I need this today as an adult. Like, there is some need for Red Warrior energy. There's need for like ritual and traditional energy, and to conserve what's good in the world. And then there's need for like innovation, and then there's also need to honor everyone's unique perspectives. And so, second tier is the first level that's actually capable of looking at the world and understanding how to build systems that can take care of everybody. So systems thinking is a huge thing that really comes online here. So it sees natural hierarchy. So holarchy is his term for things that grow. It's not, you have to be careful. Dominator hierarchy is when you suppress what's beneath you. Holarchy or natural hierarchy is when you allow something to grow in a healthy manner. So it would be really dumb if I tried to kill all the cells within my body. Like, they are part of me. It'd be equally ridiculous to look at society and try to snuff out traditional religious culture. Like, that is part of me, and it's part of how we raise our children, and it's part of how we raise each other, and we need to integrate it into the higher levels. So this sees systems of systems, holds multiple perspectives, it's flexible, creative, effective, and so it's integration systems, holarchy. There are more. This one is six-person perspectives. The best thing to say about this is probably that it looks at systems of systems and it moves into a more intuitive space, and it tends to see the gestalt or the whole. It's not very intellectual, it's very intuitive. The brain goes quieter. You tend to look at the systems and you just kind of understand it without processing it. It sees the world as alive and evolving, holistic and cosmocentric, lives from both individual self and transpersonal self. This is just barely emerging now, so intuition, presence, sacredness. There's one more above this. So this one sees reality as unified. So, is this the 4D shift? Is going from first tier to second tier what we're talking about? And I think, with any luck, whether it's 4D or not, this is what's evolving. And so, here's a question. Is there beauty in developmental diversity? And this is just something to think about. Like, when you come across a narcissist, or somebody who's a fundamental religious person, or somebody who's just obsessed with science and doesn't really care about emotions, or somebody who's obsessed with emotions, doesn't care about science, do you judge that? Because this big shift we're talking about is about embracing that and loving that as part of yourself. And if you're judging that, you're probably denying it in yourself. And we tend to project what we can't really appreciate in ourselves. And so second tier is a type of, the mean green meme that the people who are in universities now talk about diversity, but it's surface level diversity. It's diversity of, your skin color or your religion or your gender, but it's not really viewpoint diversity. This has to include viewpoint diversity. So this is my ugliest slide, I think. This is looking at basically when did these emerge in history, And what you're going to see is there's something crazy happening. So the infrared level, we really have no idea. Maybe it took 350,000 years to incubate and come online. So maybe this took 50,000 for magenta. So this is like tribalism, shamanism, like really primitive. So that top one should be a lot longer, but it goes off the screen. So what's happening here? There's something crazy is accelerating. So if it took 200, 300,000 years for this one to be born, 40, 50,000 years for this, 3,000, 16,000, this is the 1600s, so 1,400 years, 350 years, 50, 15 maybe? So just to give you a sense, this is shamanic. These are like tribes, and they're all kind of fused with each other. There's not a lot of individuality. When red comes online, we have warriors, like these warring tribes that are led by a strong personality. But then religion and cities, and we have laws, and we have myth, and we have agrarian societies. And then in the 1600s, we have modernity. We have a scientific revolution. We have, that is really, that's the third person perspective. Fourth person perspective, 1960s, hippies growing their hair out, smoking pot, men admitting they have emotions, women going back to work and realizing they can run companies. That was a massive, massive shift. Teal, this integral level, 2010s, 2020s, I'll show you, the numbers are very small. It appears there's a certain tipping point. So this is the estimated global distribution. And actually, Peter Mary just did his own AI research with a whole bunch of global data, and he came out exactly where people have been saying. He has it by country, which is amazing, and some countries are much further ahead. Japan is surprisingly integral. Sweden is shockingly green, well, not shockingly. So infrared, 0.1%, it could be lower than that. Like, these people can't function. People who are magical thinking, 10%. Red, which is this like power-focused, more narcissistic, is 20%. The vast majority of the people on the planet are what we would call conventional. They like order. More truth comes from religion. Science being truth is maybe 30%. The green level, where people want equality and they think your perspective is primary, is at 8 to 10%. In the 60s and 70s, this reached 8%. The hypothesis, because we haven't really watched this happen very much and we're guessing, is that 8% represents a tipping point. And when we get to 8% of a population, people moved into positions of power and they have increasing authority, and so institutions and systems. And so the whole culture gets swept up in this. One of the problems of a pure democracy, one vote, one person, is that the lower levels will be in control. Because of the way we have representation, the higher levels can actually take over. So, who's in control? So the question then is this a giant clusterfuck? Because here's what happens when different stages interact. So tribal versus traditional, that was empire building. So empires were built by destroying tribes, by going around and just consuming them. It was kinetic warfare, very, very violent. Traditional versus modern. So one example is the Civil War in America. Here we have a values clash. Slavery. Do we believe in slavery? The modern level said no and went to war over it, which is a beautiful thing, but it was still kinetic. It was a physical, violent war. What's happening right now? We have a culture war. This is orange science innovation versus equality as a value. So this is mimetic. It's values-based. We're arguing over what's valuable. This is from going from gross to subtle to causal. This is a subtler war. We're burning some cars, but we're not killing a lot of people. This is a very, very hopeful sign because these clashes are going to increase in frequency. What's going to happen when the green and the integral meet? This is already happening. We're fighting over how to make meaning. Semantic fragmentation is happening. Like, green is refusing to admit what's one truth. Integral is fighting for there to be like a shared truth that we can all look at. And then, what happens when the next, this is nowhere near happening, but when integral in the second tier stage, there's going to be a noetic battle. It's going to be about integration, and this is probably not going to be the least bit violent. But we'll see. We have no idea. So one key point to remember is there's a difference between states of consciousness and stages of consciousness. Everything I've been talking about is stages of consciousness. They're like a ladder. You grow through them. You can't skip them. You have to spend time at one to get to the other. It can take, if you're working really hard, say 5 years to work through a stage. Sometimes it happens quickly, sometimes it happens over 50 years, sometimes it never happens at all. States of consciousness are ever present and always available. You can have a gross, right now if I'm looking at you, you're in gross physical reality. In my head, in my thoughts, in my emotions, that's subtler. And then if I go into a causal state in meditation, say, then there's nothing that I'm aware of but awareness. That is even subtler still, and there's a whole lot of subtle in between. Every day, gross waking reality, subtle dreaming states, causal dreamless sleep. So we all have access to these all the time. This is called the Wilbur-Combs lattice. And so along the left side is stages of development. Along the top is states of consciousness. So what happens is every one of us can and probably has had non-dual states of awareness. The moment you come out of it, you interpret it through a lens. That lens is your stage of development, including all the lines of development. And so the vast majority of enlightened masters who are teaching today are probably at rational and pluralistic. The world is full of enlightened Buddhist teachers who are racist and sexist. That's just a fact. Being enlightened doesn't make you morally evolved. You have to do the inner work. It's a different process. So it's just really important to note it, that like your experiences are real. They're valid. They're absolute. Like if you've experienced ultimate oneness with everything, there's no delay. Like yes, that is real. You have been there. And there's still a process of growing up to be able to embody that and share that with others in a more evolved way. A classic way of breaking down reality is true, the good, and the beautiful, which is first, second, and third person perspectives. If Ken Wilber added anything to like the academic philosophy world, and they would say he hasn't, he added a fourth quadrant, which is, so this is the interior of one person. It's your personal experience. This is hermeneutics. This is the interior of a collective. It's shared interior meaning. So everything on this side is subjective. This is the objective side. This is the exterior of individual things. Most science is happening here, especially if it's reductionist. And then down here we have systems. How do all these particles up here interact? How do we think about external objects moving together? If you want to take a holistic perspective on things, a good place to start is by including all four of these quadrants in any work you're doing. Everything I've just discussed is basically happening in one quadrant. So this is your spiritual line of development, your moral line, your psychosexual line, interpersonal, emotional, cognitive. I'm basically, there are external reference for all of this, but this is basically all happening within your interior, within your consciousness. If we were to break it out into all four quadrants, you could see how he would say things co-arise in all four quadrants. So when you're at this stage, atoms support this level of interiority. So this is kind of panpsychic. He would even say perhaps galaxies have prehension. And then as the physical matter gets more complex, the interior experience gets more complex, but so does the shared experience between them. What I'll leave you with, and I don't know what my time is, but I figured there would be questions, and I'm happy to take questions if it's helpful. But just to think about what stages you're nurturing and in what lines of development. And are you trying to access states of consciousness? Is that why you're meditating? Are you trying to increase your moral development? Are you trying to understand spirituality in an intellectual way, which is not the actual sitting, but sitting outside of it? Because all of this is activated within you, whether you're paying attention to it or not. And I think 4D is vaguely pointing towards the fact that collectively we have to evolve, or we're going to destroy the planet and maybe each other. And there is the consciousness that we need emerging. It is happening. And if it steps into positions of power, its leading edge does become more integral and take over. There's a lot of hope, and we might move from the ambitious orange, what can I do, to like, what do we actually want to do, and what's because it's good for everyone.